Let's start our discussion of double versus single action guns by looking at a single action revolver. Now this is a classic revolver design that's been around for a long time. Most of the parts though are pretty similar to a modern revolver. The main difference is the fact that this is a single action gun. So once you have it loaded, you will have to pull back the hammer between each shot. The trigger only does one thing: it releases the hammer. So before you fire this gun, every single time, you need to pull back the hammer. There are also single action semi-autos. Now they do tend to have more modern features on them, like external safeties, but they still have a hammer that has to be pulled back before the first shot, because the trigger will only release the hammer. It only does one thing. The big difference between a single action revolver and a single action semi-automatic is the slide mechanism will actually push back the hammer between each shot after the first shot. So you need to pull back the hammer, cock the hammer on the first shot for this gun, but after that the slide will cock the hammer for you. A modern double action revolver is very similar in function to a single action revolver, with the big exception that the trigger will cock and release the hammer. So once this double action revolver is loaded, all you have to do is squeeze the trigger to make it go off. You can choose to pull back the hammer manually and squeeze the trigger, but you don't have to, because the trigger will do it for you. This double action semi-auto also has an external hammer that you can cock if you choose to fire the gun as if it is a single action, though it is a double action. Once this gun is loaded, you can either just squeeze the trigger, which will cock and release the hammer, or you can pull back the hammer and squeeze the trigger, and then after that first shot, the slide will automatically push back the hammer. This is a double action gun though, because the trigger will do two things: it will cock and release the hammer. And finally, we have a double action only semi-auto. Again, does have external safeties on it, but this gun, when you squeeze the trigger, will cock and release an internal mechanism called a striker, which acts like a hammer, and then hit a firing pin to hit the cartridge. You only squeeze the trigger on this gun to do those two things, cocking and releasing the striker mechanism.